And we're back. Welcome to the channel. My name is Luke, and today we're doing my top 100 rankings for this fantasy season head-to-head points leagues. So, as is the case every time I do this video, I gotta preface with three quick things. The first is that this list is in the order I would draft these players in. That's all. It's just my opinion. I'm just putting it out there to try to help you guys with your drafts. It's definitely not 100% right, but I tried my best. You may disagree. That's perfectly fine. We're all gonna have different lists. But if you do disagree with any of the rankings, you don't have to be a dickhead about it. I don't really care, like feel free to, but I'm just not going to answer your thing. And then, like I said, but if you do disagree and you want to actually ask questions and not just be an arsehole, feel free to drop a comment down below, and me and others will discuss it with you, I'm sure. Like I said, we're all just trying to help each other out here. No need to be all up in arms. So the last thing is that this entire ranking list is going to be in my Discord under top 100 rankings. So hit that up if you want to see the list in its full form. The link to the Discord is going to be in the description. I'm also rusty and I forgot to say subscribe and shit if you want to as well. But now, with that being said, let's get into it. Alright, so this is 100 to 91. I'm probably not going to go too in-depth on every single player. I'll just kind of talk about like the main ones that I feel like talking about. The three that just missed out on this list, just in case you're wondering, were Clint Capella, Daniel Gafford, and D'Angelo Russell. They just missed my top 100. D'Lo, you might be able to make the case, but I think Gabe Vincent and Austin Reeves and all these additions and sort of players developing is really going to hurt his production. I'm not really expecting him to hit top 100, but I wouldn't be surprised if he snuck in like the bottom half. But anyways, at 100, Christian Wood. On the Lakers, he's kind of hit or miss for me. I'm not too sure how the rotations are going to work with him. I could definitely see him getting a lot of minutes and being a good player. But at the same time, if they decide they need to prioritize their defense, they'll probably play Jared Vanderbilt, maybe play some Rui Hachimura a bit more as well. So kind of remains to be seen, kind of maybe a long shot, but I could definitely see him surpassing 100 as well. But I definitely think he's ending up in the top 100 for sure. Then we got the two Utah Jazz players, John Collins, Jordan Clarkson. I think John Collins is going to get better than he was in Atlanta now that he's not, standing in the corner with Trae Young dribbling the shit out of the ball. And he's not really set to be that kind of player. He's more of attacking the basket. Yes, he can shoot threes. Not his ideal role. I think on the Jazz, might be a little bit better. These are all guys I'm expecting to average like roughly around 30 fantasy points per game-ish. As you can see coming up, we got the mid-ass small forwards that you kind of have to take in this range. But first, Buddy Hield, Markelle Fultz. Orlando Magic's guards situation is kind of weird. They have like a fucking log jam, so I'm not really too sure how that's going on, but I do think Markelle Fultz starts and is like the predominant guard fantasy player anyway. That was a horrible sentence, but forgive me, I haven't fucking recorded a video in a while. Andrew Wiggins up next, then Keldon Johnson. I think he's going to do a bit better now that he's not the number one option because he was just way like out of his league doing that. I think he's more suited to the role he's going to have this year, so I could expect his fantasy production to be a bit higher. Then we have Terry Rozier. Don't get me wrong, the Hornets still suck my dick, but I'm pretty sure that he's not going to be shooting like 32% from three now that he's not like having to do so much off the dribble because they got Melo back, they got Brandon Miller coming in and everything. So I'm not expecting him to average 35, but I could definitely see him having around 30. Jeremy Grant, not too much to say, pretty boring. And then Tobias Harris at 91. Again, he kind of mid. There's the James Harden situation, which I am going to talk about with another Philly player soon to watch, but I think even with Harden staying, I mean, Tobias Harris is pretty reliably going to average around 30 fantasy points per game, so I think he does sneak into the top 100, even though, like I said, it is kind of a more boring, stale pick, but, you kind of have to take it. Plus, small forwards are kind of a scarce position this year, in my opinion, like, well, at least with ESPN's system of, like, positioning players right now. Hopefully they add some more multi-positions soon. I don't really know the whole deal on that. Hopefully they get on that shit soon, because it's kind of annoying. But yeah, next up we have 90 to 81. Alright, so starting off at 90, we have the felon Miles Bridges. I literally don't understand how they're letting this dude play in the league. It just kind of shows you the NBA really doesn't give a shit, but if he does play, he's on like a 10-game suspension or some bullshit, I think. He's obviously going to be pretty solid for fantasy, so I'm putting him in here. 89, we have Mark Williams, going to be the starting center for the Hornets in my estimates. I'm pretty sure he's going to have a very good season, especially playing with LaMelo Ball. I think he's going to have a lot of lob threats. LaMelo is one of the best lob passers in the league, in my opinion, and I do think Mark Williams is going to have a nice rebounding, scoring, and then a few blocks thrown in here to give you some pretty decent fantasy stats. Moving on, we have two Blazers, Shaden Sharp and Ayton. I think Sharp and Scoot Henderson are kind of the team's future. Throw that Anthony Simons in there. That's a very solid three-guard rotation to have going on. And then with DeAndre Ayton, I am a little bit concerned. I was talking to some boys in the Discord, getting some help with the list. Shout out the Sammy boys. We got to get a better name for that because fuck Sam. But I'm pretty sure, I feel like DeAndre Ayton and Rob Will are sort of going to have to split minutes because I don't think you can play both of them and have Scoot Henderson playing at the same time. I just think your spacing is going to be horrendous that way. So interested to see the rotations on that, but I'm pretty sure DeAndre Ayton is like comfortably going to stay within like this 90 to 81 range in terms of the fantasy season. I would still feel comfortable drafting him here anyways. So, and then at 86 we have Ben Simmons. I'm not really one of those people that's like counting on a Ben Simmons resurgence season. I think at this point it's kind of like he's too much of an X factor, but I mean, he does have the upside, so you can't really leave him out of the top 100. So I'd feel comfortable taking him around here. There's just a lot more people ahead of him that I would say you kind of know, you have a better sense of that kind of production you're going to get out of them. So, anyways, 85, Wendell Carter Jr., 84, Chris Middleton. I had Chris Middleton a bit higher before the Dame trade. Obviously, I think that does hurt his scoring and assists a little bit. Not too much to say. And then, like I already said, my dumbass put Klay Thompson's name in here twice, so just ignore this one. He's on the next slide. And then Michael Porter Jr. at 82, expecting pretty similar production to last year. I think his efficiency is going to be a bit better. He did have sort of a slow start and a bit of some injury problems at the start of the season, if I remember correctly. But I think comfortably he's going to average around 32 fantasy points per game. And then at 81, we got Brook Lopez, old as shit, the Splash Mountain. I still think he's going to be pretty solid for fantasy, even with Damian Lillard coming there, because, I mean, he gets a lot of value from the blocks, and then he's still going to be having a lot of three-point shots. And, man, the Bucks are going to be so good this year. Like, I don't know how any team but the Celtics is really going to beat them right now. But anyways, it's kind of a tangent. Whatever. Just go to 80 now. So starting off, we got Aaron Gordon. I think he's going to have a pretty similar role to last season. The Nuggets didn't really change that much, in my opinion. So expecting some pretty similar production. Very decent, solid fantasy player. Nothing too special there. Tyus Jones in Washington now. One of my favorite point guards. I don't know why. He's just so smart with the ball. Doesn't turn it over a lot. Obviously, I think Jordan Poole's running the team, but I still think, Tyus Jones could rack up some sneaky assists and some scoring, at least enough to end him up in around this range, sort of averaging around 32-ish fantasy points. Then next up, we got Klay Thompson for real this time. I don't really know too much about what I'm expecting his numbers to be like with the addition of Chris Paul. I think probably close to the same, if not maybe a bit better. I don't know, kind of depends. Chris Paul is kind of a weird variable, which we're going to talk about, as you can see soon, because I'm not really too sure how they're going to use him and the rotations and everything like that. There's some talk about Klay Thompson guarding power forwards. I don't really know yet. We're going to have to wait and see there. Then we have OG Anunoby, expecting pretty similar things. And Fred VanVleet is gone, but I don't really think OG is the necessary beneficiary of that because he's more of their prototypical 3-and-D kind of player. 76, Rudy Gobert. 75, we got Austin Reeves. I am expecting him to have a bit of a jump this season. He looked really good in the playoffs for the Lakers, and especially in the FIBA World Cup. He looked like he's taken a big step in his creation and scoring. So I think his fantasy production is going to be a bit higher. 74, we got Jalen Williams from the OKC Thunder. Again, similar kind of deal. He looks a lot more solid and confident as a player now than he did when he was in his rookie season. I'm expecting him to average around 33 fantasy points per game. Then we got Chris Paul, and my man's is getting so old. Like, it looks like it physically hurts him to shoot a three-pointer. So I don't really know what's going on, but he still averaged like 40 fantasy points last year. I don't think he's going to average 40 again with the Warriors, but I do expect him to still be a pretty decent fantasy player, probably around this range. But like I said, I just don't know the rotations. There's some talk about like playing him in 5-minute bursts. I really am just not too confident to be placing him any higher than this right now. 72, we have Russell Westbrook. We all know the man is an absolute beast when Kawhi and Paul George miss games, which I think is inevitably going to happen. One thing to monitor, though, is Malcolm Brogdon on the Blazers. I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers sort of went for him. He is kind of like a Clippers kind of player for right now. They really need a point guard, in my opinion, that's a little bit better at shooting and, not Bones Highland, who can't really, guard. So Russell Westbrook, for now, I will put him here because he just, like I said, the upside is just enormous whenever even just Kawhi misses a game. He's just going to have a lot better output, and even with the two of them playing, he's still an okay fantasy player, just not to the same extent that he can be when he's like fully unleashed. And then at 71, we have Devin Vassell, who I think is going to benefit playing with Victor Wembanyama because he's going to have a little bit more spacing now. Teams aren't going to be as heavily focused on him. He did have a bit of a down year yesterday, but I do think he's still a pretty decent fantasy player, and I expect him to end up around the 71 range. All right, so we got Anthony Simons at 70. Sorry, this one's a bit hard to read. The other ones will be a lot better and more clear. Like I said, just get this list in the Discord under top 100s ranking. Save yourself the trouble. That way you don't have to watch the video and shit. But just drop a like and subscribe if it helps at least, like I said. But yes, Anthony Simons at 70. I don't know why I'm so high on Anthony Simons. I think he's really fucking good, and I do think we're going to see a very solid output out of him this year, even though they do have Scoot Henderson. Like, he's just such a solid player. Like, 3-level threat, very, like, efficient, really solid athletic shooter. I don't know, man. I'm just very high on Anthony Simons. 69, we have Tyler Hero. Again, expecting pretty similar output to last season, roughly around 34 fantasy points per game. Jalen Green, I think we are going to see him take a little bit of a leap in his efficiency now that he has Fred VanVleet playing with him. We finally have someone that can, kind of create some open shots for him that's not Kevin Porter Jr., who's, not the best at that. He's kind of selfish because it looks like he's out for the season. And then 67, Chet Holmgren, a rookie who I think is going to have some pretty immediate impact just because of on the defensive end, he's already kind of made for like getting block shots. He looks very comfortable on the defensive end, so I'm expecting him to get some blocks, some scoring here and there. I don't think his scoring is going to be like anything to blow you away because, when you have a big guy who can dribble, it is alluring, but, their handle has to tighten up a lot before they can dribble around NBA defenders. But yeah, anyways, 66, Walker Kessler. I think he's going to have a pretty solid year for the Utah Jazz. He's solidified the role as the starting center now. It gets you some block shots, some rebounds. His scoring could be a bit higher, but, you take what you can get. 65, we have Trey Jones, who I think is going to have a lot of more, open space and ability to sort of play make with the addition of Victor Wembanyama. I am expecting him to be a very solid, the fucking state in the obvious. Obviously, I think Victor Wembanyama is going to be good. Hot take alert. Anyways, 64, we have Scoot Henderson. He's kind of fitting in that prototype of hyper athletic guards that's not great at shooting outside threes. He also does kind of have a proclivity to be, firing up the long mid-range twos. At least he did with the G League Ignite. So definitely something I'm a little concerned about. Hopefully he doesn't get that Kobe-itis and shoots a ton of mid-ranges, especially when he's not super efficient with that shot. But I think it'll probably get drilled out of him now that he's playing for an NBA team. But yeah, it kind of remains to be seen, if even with all that said. You have a hyper-athletic guard who's got good court vision. I think he's going to be just fine as the number one option. He's going to land probably around this range, 35-ish fantasy points per game. Next up, we got Franz Wagner. Again, very high on Franz Wagner. I talked about him a lot last season. I do think this year we see a little bit of a jump in his production. Then 62, Miles Turner. 61, Jared Allen. These are guys that I'm expecting to have pretty similar fantasy scoring numbers to last year, so not expecting too much of a change, and neither of their teams really changed all that much, so you can kind of just go off last season, in my opinion, for estimating what I think their value is going to be. All right, so now we've reached the point where I think most of these guys are going to average over 35 fantasy points per game, but it's not too many more, kind of looking at 35 to 37 fantasy point per game average. At 60, we have CJ McCollum. 59, Spencer Dinwiddie. I was a bit higher on Spencer Dinwiddie, but talk to some of the boys, and they, there is the Ben Simmons factor, which not too sure how that's going to play out if Ben Simmons ends up missing time. I do think Dinwiddie could make a significant jump. Last year, 26 games with the Nets in that kind of situation, he was averaging 19 and 9 or something stupid like that. So definitely could see him jumping up higher than this, but had to play it reserved. 58, we got Alperen Şengün. I think he's going to have a little bit of a better season, again, because of Fred VanVleet, and then just having actual NBA players around them. I think is going to help out the Rockets in general a ton, especially their young guys. 57, we got Evan Mobley. Expecting him to take a bit of a jump this year. Nothing too crazy. I just think he's going to be a little bit more efficient. He's already an all-NBA level defender, so what more could you ask for? 56, we got Josh Giddey. 55, Paolo Banchero. Like I said, Paolo, I think I am expecting a jump. Maybe it's not as some people. Some people are expecting him to average 40 fantasy points per game for some reason. But last year he averaged 30, and I'm not really sure where they see the jump in value coming from unless he just starts scoring at a much higher clip. I do think he's going to be a bit better. Like I said, I just don't see him reaching 40 fantasy points per game. 54, we got Bradley Beal. New role on the Suns. Definitely taking a hit to his production, but I don't think it's going to be too significant. He's still the third option. Going to get plenty of shots and everything. 53, we got Nick Claxton, expecting pretty similar numbers to last year. 52, we got Kyle Kuzma, who I think is going to see a boost in his production. Now that Porzingis is gone, he's kind of the number 2 option on the Wizards right now. And I do think he's going to be a very solid fantasy option to have. And then 51, Scotty Barnes. I think Scotty Barnes is going to have a boost in his value because of Fred leaving. I think he's going to be running the point a little bit more because you don't really want Dennis Scrotum handling the ball all of the time if you're the Raptors. You want to kind of develop Barnes. His playmaking has shown some flashes of looking pretty solid, kind of the point forward traditional, well, not traditional, point forward kind of role that's sort of starting to develop in the league. I say starting to develop. It's fucking been here forever. But anyways, you know what I mean. I haven't recorded in a while. Leave me alone. Making this list just made me realize how many good fantasy players are in the league, because it's kind of crazy that some of these guys are ranked 50 to 41, but when you see who I have ahead of them, it's hard to argue that they deserve to be any higher. But we'll go ahead and get started. At 50, we have Tyrese Maxey. I'm expecting him to average around 38 fantasy points per game this year. He has the potential to be even higher with the James Harden situation. He was the guy who I was mainly referring to earlier when I was talking about Tobias Harris, because it's just really fucking weird. I do expect Harden to probably play or get moved or something. I don't think he's going to sit out, but I'm just really very unclear on the whole situation. If he does leave, Tyrese Maxey does have a little bit more potential to sort of jump up these rankings, but for now, I'm just comfortable placing him at 50. 49, we have Desmond Bain. I think he's going to be a lot better than for the first, 25 games while Ja Morant's out. Even then, after Ja gets back, he's still going to be a very decent fantasy option. Don't expect him to drop off too much, but just be aware, as with most Grizzlies players, they're going to have inflated value, I think, for the first little bit of the season. At 48, we have Zach LaVine. Again, pretty similar situation with the Bulls. They're kind of, not doing anything, stuck in the purgatory of being like a 8 to 10 seed forever, so nothing too special there. 47, we have Drew Holiday on the Celtics now. I think his production goes down a little bit from last season, but nothing too crazy because he is still just a very solid point guard to have. I think he's going to have, his assists are going to be pretty good, his scoring is going to be decent, and he's always going to have the steals and everything there. So, and then this is kind of where it gets interesting because, again, another truck going by, sorry about that. 46, we have Ja Morant, and obviously with the case with Ja Morant is like we all know he's not playing at the start of the season. And when you're drafting him, you're really kind of just hoping for like the playoffs impact that you're going to get. Because, I mean, if you get Ja Morant late in your leagues and then he comes back and he's healthy, you're just going to get like a lot of boost come playoff time. But you kind of have to bet that your team's going to make it there first. So I'm comfortable putting him here. Everyone ahead of him, I think it's like I'd rather just have guys that I know are going to average 40 fantasy points per game at least and are going to play all season so I can make the playoffs. So kind of a higher risk, high upside kind of pick with Ja Morant. But anyways, same with the next two players. We got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Now, I know there's a lot of players coming up that are sort of injury risk, but I mean, Kawhi at this fucking point, it's like the dude's knees are just dust, and I feel bad for him, but I just have no confidence whatsoever that he's going to play in, like, I don't know, even like 50 games at this season. It's just, he's too high a risk to justify taking any higher than this, in my opinion. I'm just not comfortable, and even now, it's like, if I'm in this kind of draft situation, would I be cool just taking, like, Drew Holiday over him? I mean, probably not, but at the same time, if my first picks I'm not too comfortable with, I wouldn't blame anyone for kind of taking the safer, less injury risk kind of players. And then kind of likewise with Paul George. I do think Paul George is going to play in more games than Kawhi Leonard, but for fantasy, his numbers have seen a little bit of a decline in recent years, so I'm going to put him around here. 43, we have Cade Cunningham. Did get hurt last season, missed a lot of time, but I do think he is sort of poised to now have the fantasy season we were expecting him to have last year. I think he'll probably average close to 40 fantasy points per game, so he's going to be coming in at 43 for me. And then we have the two Celtics, the newest addition. Well, not the newest anymore, I guess, Drew Holiday. But we got Kristaps at 41, Jaylen Brown at 42. I do think, they're going to eat into each other's scoring a slight bit, but nothing too crazy. I do obviously still think they're going to be very solid fantasy players, and I think they're going to come in around 42 and 41 for me. So that's going to do it for 50 to 41, and now we'll go ahead and get into the next ranking. All right, so these are the guys who I'm expecting to average like 40 fantasy points per game, approximately to like low 40s. So coming in at 40, we got Mikal Bridges, 39, Brandon Ingram, Vucevic at 38. I mean, obviously the guy just consistently averages 40 fantasy points per game, nothing too special, but he's a very solid, consistent player. He's played in a lot of games, hasn't missed too much the last few seasons. Always like having him on my teams if you've been following the channel for a while. I'm a big Vooch fan. But again, I always fuck up his name and people get mad at me, and I always forget what the correct pronunciation is. So sorry if you're that guy that comments it every time, but again, I don't care that much. Anyways, 37, we got Victor Wembanyama. I think I might be a little lower on him than some other people. I do think he's going to be a very solid NBA player. I obviously think he's going to be very good in the future. It's just coming in on his rookie season. He's not a three-point threat necessarily as of right now. He does have the potential to be, but he didn't shoot the three too well last year in France. But I do think he's going to just be an absolute monster on the defensive end. He's going to have some great scoring numbers, rebounding, doing it all kind of deal. So I think he is going to average around 40 fantasy points per game. I'm just not sure if he's getting much higher than that in his first year anyway. But hey, I could be wrong on this one. You never know. Then we got DeJounte Murray, Darius Garland, Jamal Murray. Throwing some guards in here who I think are going to have some pretty solid years. DeJounte Murray's typically around 40 fantasy points per game as he was last season. Darius Garland, I think, is going to have a little bit of a boost. His numbers did drop a little bit with Donovan Mitchell's addition to the team, but I do think he's still going to be a pretty decent point guard. And then Jamal Murray, I'm expecting to take a little bit of a jump too. I mean, we all saw as the season progressed, he got a lot better. And I mean, in the playoffs, he was just unreal. So if he can carry that kind of output into the season, I do think he's going to end up around the spot. And then to finish it off, we got Bam Adebayo, DeMar DeRozan, and Lauri Markkanen, all guys who I think are averaging, low 40s in fantasy points. Not too much has changed on their roles on their respective teams, so just going to have them pretty consistently with what I think they had last year, kind of around the same kind of range. All right, now we're in like the upper echelon kind of guys. At 30, I have Jordan Poole. I think he's going to be unreal on Washington for fantasy. I think his turnovers are going to be a bit higher than what ESPN's giving him credit for. But I mean, in his games without Steph Curry, he was putting up some crazy numbers, and I do think that's going to carry over into Washington. I think he's going to be having a very high scoring season, definitely over, I think, like at least 25 points per game just in scoring alone. He's going to have some assists in there as well. So I am expecting a big year out of Jordan Poole. 29, we got Zion Williamson, and I know this may be a bit higher than some of you, but just hear me out. Like, when you look at guys that average 50 fantasy points per game, like Zion, I think is going to, if they even play in 50 games like LeBron did last year, they end up in the top 20 for like total points scored for the league. So I think, I mean, if I'm taking the risk that do I think Zion can play in 50 games? I'm like, maybe. It doesn't seem to be asking too much. That's almost missing like half the season. I do think, like, with that potential in mind, you can't really let him fall any lower than that, because if someone gets him and he ends up playing in more than 50 games, that's like a league-winning kind of pick. So I think if Zion is still there at 29, I do think that at this range I'm starting to reach for him. So that's kind of my rationale for putting him here. Up next, we have the two solid, consistent Knicks players. We all know Tibbs is going to play them into the ground. They're going to get the minutes. They're going to be consistent. They're both pretty solid, haven't missed too much time. You kind of know what you're going to get from them at this point. And then next up, we have Jaren Jackson Jr. I think he's going to have a very solid year, especially with Ja missing at the start. All know he won Defensive Player of the Year last year. Really good player, very good for fantasy. Not too much to say. Same with Karl Anthony Towns. I think maybe we can see him have a bit of a better year this year. He missed some time last season. Didn't look too comfortable playing with Gobert. I think maybe they can sort of sort that out in Minnesota, make it a lot more fluid this season. I don't know. I'm not expecting Minnesota to get better, but I do think Anthony Edwards is going to take a huge leap, as I think everyone else does in the world. So not too much to say. At 24, we have Fred VanVleet. This is with Kevin Porter Jr. being announced that he's out for the year. Fred VanVleet averaged like 43 fantasy points per game last year, and I do expect him to have a similar kind of output now. Like I said, I haven't said this yet, but the efficiency problems with Fred VanVleet, obviously they're there, but I think he's the main ball handler. He's going to have some very high assist numbers, probably average around 20 points per game. You put that together, you're getting a top 30 fantasy player in my opinion. So that's why I kind of have him here. I might be a bit higher on Fred VanVleet than some people, but like I said, you just kind of have to remember Kevin Porter Jr. is out now, so he's kind of doesn't have as much competition for the starting point guard spot. Yes, there's Amen Thompson, but I do think, you paid the money for Fred VanVleet. He's getting the big minutes. And then 23, we have Jimmy Butler. He is a bit of an injury risk to some people, but I mean, he played in 64 games last year, averaged around 45 fantasy points, and the Miami Heat have done literally nothing. Sorry, Miami Heat fans, you guys are pretty much the same team you were last year, and I still don't think you have a chance of winning the title, but, maybe you'll make the finals again, who knows. Anyways, bit of a tangent there. I think Jimmy Butler's going to have pretty similar numbers to last season. 22, we have Pascal Siakam. I think his numbers take a leap with Fred VanVleet being gone. I think he's going to be asked to do a lot more. He's already the number one option. He's a very solid fantasy player, and, very decent if you can get him around the 22 range. And then 21, this one's kind of weird, is James Harden. Like I said with Harden earlier, I just don't really know. So, I'll update the rankings on the Discord once we get some more Harden news, kind of see where shit's going with that. But for the time being, he's just too good of a fantasy player to let slide past that, because if he does play, you're looking at like a high 40s average for a fantasy player, and you can't really let that fall any lower than 21 in my opinion. But like I said, totally get it if you're not comfortable drafting him. Just take Pascal, Jimmy, any of the guys listed here instead. Honestly, there's not like too big of a gap in my opinion between James Harden, Pascal, and Jimmy. So kind of just use your own intuition. This list is more of just like a guide to sort of give you my opinion, sort of maybe validate some of your own, give you some things to think about. But yeah, now we're gonna go ahead and get into the top 20. Sorry if I've been talking way too fast throughout all this video. I just assume nobody's even really watching at this point. You kind of just go for the list, so I kind of try to speed through, but I'll take my time for the 20s to 11s the best that I can. So we have LeBron at 20, Anthony Davis at 19. I already sort of mentioned this, but if you get 50 games out of these guys, you're looking at like top 20 total fantasy point production. So it's not like that's asking a lot. I assume they'll probably play in 50 games, and with that as a given, it's not a given with Anthony Davis, of course, but even if they hit 50, you're going to get the top 20 kind of value. So I think it is a good kind of position to take them in. And then 18, we have Kyrie Irving. I think high 40s is what he's going to average again. Maybe you're a bit concerned he's going to miss time for some random Kyrie reason. Totally fair, but I think he is still a top 20 fantasy player in my opinion. 17, we have De'Aaron Fox. 16, Devin Booker. I think these guys are averaging around 45 fantasy points per game this season. Then we have Donovan Mitchell and Trae Young. To me, there's not a lot separating these. I think Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, and Devin Booker are a little bit above De'Aaron Fox, but not too much. Like Trae Young, Dono, and Devin Booker are all very close in my opinion. So take your pick. This is just the order I would draft them in personally, but like I said, no bad options here really once you get into the top 20. 13, we have Anthony Edwards. I mentioned it when I was talking about Towns. I'm expecting him to take a pretty big leap this season. Hopefully he was taking a lot more long twos than I'd like to see during the FIBA World Cup, but that might just be because of, the rule changes surrounding like three in the key and all that the FIBA Cup has. So we'll see. I think his scoring is going to see an increase, or maybe his assists will see a number, but yeah, see a number, fucking Christ. See a bit of an increase as well. But yeah, overall, I think 13 seems like a pretty confident place to draft him. Plus, he plays in a ton of games, which is always a nice, confident thing to have going into the season. And then 12, we have Kevin Durant. I think his numbers drop a bit from last year, but not by much. He's still averaging high 40s, still very close to a top 10 fantasy asset. So you can't really leave him any lower than that. It's Kevin Durant. We kind of all know what's going on. And then at 11, we have LaMelo Ball. He missed a bit of time last season with that ankle injury, but he looks like he's healthy again this year. And like I already mentioned, the Hornets still suck, but they got a bit better. They have some more spacing around Melo now. He has a center that's not, Mason Plumlee, so he can actually throw some lobs, sort of have some roll action, pick and roll action going on. So overall, I think he's going to have a very good fantasy year this year, as are all of these guys. Like I said, there's really not a bad pick in my opinion once you get into the 11 to 20 range. It's more when you're in like the 100 to the 70 range where the picks really start to matter. Here, there's all good options. It's just kind of what you're looking for and what you're more confident in. And finally, we've made it to the fabled top 10. As you can see, I typed Giannis's name wrong in here. Just ignore that. And I don't think there's like a huge difference between like all of these guys. Like obviously, I think they are very set in some of them, and I'll talk about that distinction. But like I said, when you're in this like 1 to 20 range, someone put it very nicely that I agree with. It's like you're not going to like win your draft with this pick, but you can certainly lose it. So it's really just kind of you're preying on health. You're playing. All of these guys are averaging like close to 50 fantasy points per game. They're all good players. You can't really go wrong. It's just a matter of like the fine margins here. So it's not going to like, don't be like devastated if you get like a Jason Tatum instead of a Joel Embiid, because both going to be very solid fantasy players, if that makes sense. So anyways, we'll just go in order. At 10, we have Damian Lillard. I think he's going to have a very good season with the Bucks. Him and Giannis, that pick and roll is just going to be filthy. That high pick and roll is going to be crazy. He's going to have an explosive scoring season, as he always does. His assists are going to be high. He's going to be averaging close to 50 fantasy points per game. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he's even higher than 10, but I'm pretty comfortable putting him in here. At number 9, we have Steph Curry. I think he's going to have pretty similar numbers to last year. I think Chris Paul's addition actually helps Steph Curry a little bit in terms of just like, him and Klay Thompson running around and having like one of the best passers of all time sort of, playing off of that. I think that's just like a lethal offense if they can make it work. So I am expecting Steph Curry to have, is it even possible for him to get any better in terms of his efficiency and shit? I don't really know. The main moral of the story is Steph Curry at 9. Domantas Sabonis at 8. We all know I love the Saboner. This guy, I draft him like every year. He's just so solid and consistent. You know what he's going to give you every single season. I definitely have a little bit of an infatuation problem with him at this point, but he's never let me down before, and I don't think he's going to start now. At 7, we have Tyrese Halliburton. I think he's averaging around 50 fantasy points as well. It hasn't changed too much on the Pacers, and he had a very solid fantasy season last year. At 6, we have Giannis. I think his numbers aren't going to change too much. Him and Dame, I think they can coexist quite peacefully. It's just, he has missed a few more games, and he has some knee problems that I'm like, it doesn't, like, before last season, he was at 3, now he's at 6. But like I said, you could easily make the case to me to take Giannis over Tatum, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or Joel Embiid, and I would listen. For me personally, this is probably the order I would draft them in. And then at 5, we have Jason Tatum. There is the addition of Porzingis, but I think, honestly, that just gives the Celtics even more spacing. I think the Celtics are just going to be, like, absolutely cracked. I'm expecting Jason Tatum to have a big year. Very similar numbers to last year. I don't think his production is the thing that's going to suffer. At 4, we have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Thunder are looking good, man. They're looking really good, and Shai's at the forefront of that. I think he's averaging low 50s this year. Similar to last season, number 1 option. He's so good at scoring. The assists are there. He's kind of just running things in OKC. Now they have Chet coming in, Jalen Williams, Josh Giddey. I think that's just going to make Shai's life a lot easier because he won't be getting doubled as much, hopefully. So either way, very big year I'm expecting from Shai. And then, do I really need to talk about these 3 guys too much? Joel Embiid at 3, Luka Doncic at 2, and obviously the Joker at 1. Just the absolute best players in fantasy. They've proven it reliably year after year now. I think obviously you do have to take Joker at 1 and Luka at 2, in my opinion. But like I said, from 3 to 6, you can really kind of organize that any way you like. This is just kind of my personal preference for drafting them. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for the top 100 list. Sorry if this was like very poor quality. Like I said, trying to get back into the swing of recording things. We'll hopefully get better as the season goes on. Like I said, link to the Discord in the description. The whole list is going to be posted under top 100 rankings. Hopefully this helps you guys out. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.